done all of the stuff that you can do. Everything is said and done, and now it's time to rule out things that might be keeping your dragons from eating, such as, is there something wrong with their mouth? Is there a medical problem? Do they have problems with their teeth? Do they have abscess in their mouth? Do they have some kind of a lesion or a cancer on their tongue? Is there a problem with their gums being swollen? All of these things. What's the matter, Finny? We moved to a different room where it's cooler because it's really hot down here in Southern California right now. So that's why it looks a little different. Anyway, is there something else that could be going on? Mouth rot, tail rot, scale rot. All of those things which can incidentally be caused by too high a humidity. So keep tabs on that. When you're checking your heat and your UVB, check your humidity level too, especially if you live in a state that has really high humidity. It's really easy for it to get off center. So, keep that checked out. Other things to rule out is, did they somehow get a parasite somewhere along the line? Always make sure that you're feeding farmed feeders, nothing out of the wild. You don't know in the wild whether or not they have a parasite when you find them, because they are microscopic and we can't see them with our naked eye. So, you don't know if it's an insect that's been somewhere where there's, some kind of pesticide being used. Is there something that's really a problem that could affect your dragon if they ate it? So, no wild feeders. Get your feeders from a reliable source, okay? So if they have a parasite, again, some things that might give you a clue. Very, very rarely you might see some in their fecal. That's very unusual. Usually you have to see it in a microscope in order to see it. If they're eating like a horse and they're losing weight, chances are there's probably some kind of a parasite. Do they have a bacterial infection? This could be the case. They could have coccidia, which can happen, if the levels of bacteria get ahead of you in your enclosures. If you're using a substrate that is something like repticarpet or something that is absorbent that's not disposable, then you run that risk that you're going to get a coccidia situation where it's going to be something you have to clean with an anti-coccidial, and you're going to have to make sure that you really get it cleaned and disinfected, and you have to clean all of their decor, everything in it, so you can put it back in there, and then make sure the dragon gets treatment. You need an anti-coccidial, so that will require a vet to give you that. So that's another thing to keep on the lookout for. Other reasons they might not: if your temps are all good, are they dehydrated? A lot of pet stores will tell you, give them a bath once a week. No, that is not often enough, because here's the thing. Yes, they're desert creatures. They are, that's true. They still need water to survive. They do not suck it up through their skin. They do not suck it up through their vent. They have to drink it, just like we do. So what does that mean? Well, that means you have to make sure they're getting access to a water source. Now, my dragons get bathed every day because, again, I take rescues that sometimes are sick or injured, and I can't afford for them to go into dehydration because it will give them kidney failure. And if your dragon gets renal failure, there's just not much you can do except spend whatever time you have left together, because ultimately it is lethal. So you need to make sure that they're getting enough hydration. Now, if you want to give your dragon a bath 2 or 3 times a week, that's okay. No problem. But go by and offer them other forms of water periodically. Just whenever you think about it, go by their enclosure and say, hey, I have a dropper bottle here with some water in it. Do you want some water? Offer them a drink. Give them a spray. Spray them a couple times a day. If you have a high humidity, take them out of their enclosure. Put them on a towel somewhere and give them a spritz. They will love the spritz. Then, and they'll drink whatever's on their nose. So, that's one other way. Another way, put a few drops of water, just flick water onto their greens dish so that they've got a little extra moisture on their greens. All of that, good ways to give them extra hydration. Also, a dehydrated dragon usually won't eat. So it's really essential. If you're having problems with this, especially if it's combined with constipation, they're not getting enough water. So you need to up their H2O content, however you can. That can be difficult, but however you can get them to take more in, do it. Other things to consider are, is it time to brewmate? Your dragons are likely going to stop eating when they're getting ready to go into brumation. Why? Well, they know that they don't want to have food in their stomach when they're going to be asleep. Anywhere from 3 weeks to 5 months is normal for brumation. So that's not a length of time that you want to have undigested food in your stomach. It can spoil and it can cause a lot of grief. So they will try to help themselves by limiting and going down and down and down. Now, Finn scared me to death the first time he did it. When I was a new dragon owner, I'm like, oh my God, what's the matter with him? He was acting okay, except he was slowing down, but he stopped eating his protein altogether. I checked my temps, I checked everything. Everything was fine, except he wasn't eating. What on earth is going on? But he was still eating greens, so I didn't panic. Then he slowed way down on his greens, and then a couple days after he stopped eating greens completely, he went to sleep for 3.5 months. It was fine, but I ran him to the vet. Oh my God, what's the matter with my dragon? She checked everything over, did a fecal, checked him out, everything was fine, listened to his heart and lungs. She said, I think he's just going into brumation. Terrified. I was terrified. They like to scare us so much. Oh no. So, right before brumation, your dragon's appetite's going to change in how much food they consume. It's a natural thing. I'm telling you this because if you are a new dragon owner and you want to be sure, take them before they go into brumation, because sometimes you have to supplemental feed your dragon, which means you have to give it to them whether they like it or not. One of the times you absolutely do not want to do that is if they're getting ready to go into brumation. So you have to know. I mean, with time, you're going to know. You'll start to understand what your dragon's habits are. With Finian, he's pretty standard. I know now that that's what that means. When it gets to the point where it's starting to get a little coolish outside, long about the 1st of October is normal for him, and he'll sleep till mid-February. You headbutted me. So I know that he's getting ready to do that, especially if he seems like he's okay, meaning nothing's coming out, no discharge is coming out from his eyes or from his mouth or from his nose. I don't hear any clicks or any struggles to breathe. He doesn't look like he's inhaling really hard. Any of those would be signs of illness. And so if you're new to dragon ownership, this is the first dragon that you have, you need to be sure. It's worth paying the office visit, which I know it's a terrible amount of money, to make sure that they're not truly ill. Also, juveniles do not brumate, which means your dragon should not be trying to go into brumation until they're over a year old. Sometimes closer to 2 years. So, if you have a juvenile and they act like they're trying to brumate, something is really wrong and they probably are sick. Get your body and your dragon to the vet because something is wrong, really wrong. And juveniles, you don't have as much time to try to figure it out as you do with adults. Adults can go for quite a while. Juveniles, it can wipe them out. So please take them in if you're really struggling. If you've done all of the precursors, you've checked everything, it's all fine, and your dragon acts like it doesn't want to get up, vet today if possible. Outside of brumation, is it mating season? This is the time, and it follows brumation. It comes in the spring. Oh, wait a minute. One last thing before we go into mating season. Not all dragons brumate in the winter, just so you know. Sometimes they will brumate in the summer. Finn has a couple of years, went down in June, got up over after Labor Day. Sometimes he goes down the first week of October, doesn't get up till mid-February. You have to remember they are native to Australia, and their seasons are opposite ours. So our summer is their winter. So even though chances are you have a dragon domestically bred here, Australia stopped allowing exporting of their animal population that included reptiles and bearded dragons around, I want to say 93, 94, sometime in there. So all of the bearded dragons in the animal trade now are bred here. So, but that doesn't mean that you're going to eliminate millions of years of evolution. They are native to Australia. Australia has a dry period where there's no water really to be had and no foodstuffs. The way that evolution has taught them to survive that is to sleep it off. So as soon as there's water is scarce and there's no food jumping around for them to eat, they pick a crevice in a rock and they sleep it off until those things return, till the rains come and there's water, till the bugs have mated and have offspring so that they can eat. Let's hear it for evolution, right? So that's how they survive those periods of time that if they couldn't brumate would be terrible. They would probably not survive. So those of you that have herpetological vets that tell you to not let them brumate, I'm going to tell you, please don't try to stop a natural brumation, okay? The males will sometimes not brumate, and it's fine. They don't have to. Or sometimes they'll just get kind of lazy and they'll take longer naps for a few weeks. That's fine. But if you have a brumating dragon, please don't try to stop them. Now, vets will tell you, oh, no, it's very important that you don't let them brumate because, oh my gosh, unless they have a perfect immune system, they could die during brumation. Sometimes a dragon will occasionally die. Either they had a parasite and they went to sleep, because the parasite doesn't sleep. It's going to continue to eat your dragon. So if they're asleep and they've got something eating them from the inside, they probably aren't going to wake up. I will tell you, I have seen dragons that normally brumate not brumate when they're sick. So something tells them, hey, don't sleep it off for 3 months because you might not make it, and so sometimes they don't. We keep their food and their temperatures and their water source constant. So they don't need to brumate as domesticated animals. Sometimes they don't, especially the males. Females generally will because it resets their anatomy to get ready for mating season. So again, it's part of their evolution. It tells them now is the time, and then they do it. Finn is a brumator. Chimera never has. However, he wasn't healthy enough to before. So he might this year. I don't know. We'll have to see. He's healthy enough now, but it depends on, his system and what his body tells him. Merlin, who is gargantuan and healthy as a horse, does about 6 weeks. And that's it. That's all he cares about doing. None after that. None before that. So, okay. Partly, again, it's every dragon is different, and it's just getting to know what your dragon does. Okay. When they're brumating, they do not need your help. They need you to leave them alone. Leave them alone. Turn off all of their lights. If you are in a cold climate, meaning at night it gets under 65 degrees, get them a ceramic heat emitter so that you can turn it on and you can just leave it on while they're brumating. It will just keep the ambient temperature a little warmer than what it is outside for you, especially if you're in an area that gets snow. Your ambient temperature in your house might be pretty cold. So in order to make sure your dragon stays snugly, I would give them a microfiber towel. It makes a great blanket. All of my dragons have a blanket. They love it. Some sleep under it, some sleep on top of it, some curl around it, whatever. But it does give them a little extra insulation. They all have a ceramic heat emitter. Now, again, Southern California, we don't get under 65 that often, even at night. Okay, couple of weeks in the winter, yeah. So then I just click them all on. Even if they're sleeping and I cover their enclosure, all the lights are off, I just turn on the heat emitter so the ambient temperature, you're not trying to heat their basking spot, you're just giving them an ambient temperature that stays above 65 degrees. That's all you need to do, and leave them alone. I check them once a day. I peek in because they're covered up, their whole enclosure is covered up, so I just sort of peek in, see how everybody's doing, everybody's good, okay, fine, walk away. And leave them alone. They just need you not to pick at them, not to do anything you shouldn't be doing, just leave them alone and let them brumate. It's a hard time because you miss them terribly while they're sleeping. It's the worst. But they need it. They're programmed to do it, so you just have to let them. Okay. When they get up from brumation, mating season, ta-da, which goes along in spring till early summer. Okay. Now, when it's time for mating season, it's very common, especially in the males, to hardly eat anything. They just go into survival mode. They eat starvation rations. And that's it, because they've got other things on their mind. They could care less about eating. They're looking for, females. So they're just not going to eat. So give them their food like you normally would. But again, don't be surprised if they're, number one, acting really obnoxious. I mean, the males especially. They will be obnoxious. They will bob their head. They will flare their beard. They will turn it black. Even if they're the only one in the house, they'll still do it. They will tank surf. They will do all kinds of stuff because there's a testosterone river happening, and they know it's mating season. They're interested in trying to mate, so they're not going to eat that much. Partly, too, in the wild, they may have to fight other males, maybe several, in order to get the right to mate with a female. So they don't want to be overburdened by too much food. They just want enough to keep them going in case they have to fight it out until mating season is over. So you should see midsummer to early fall, you should start to see their eating habits and their appetite return to normal. And then they will probably pig out for a while until they go into their winter brumation. Now, another thing that might happen, another reason that they might not want to eat, shedding. Shedding can be such a turmoil, mainly because, when you are just, you're kind of itchy, you're not happy about it, you got a peeling sunburn, the last thing you want to do is, chow down on something, because you're just kind of miserable. Okay, but I will tell you this, some dragons will really overeat. Now, again, I rescue. So for a while, especially with Finn for the first few years, because he had a little bit of mileage to make up, I gave him both feeders and salad every day. Normally I wouldn't do that. That's not a typical adult diet. Okay, but when they have to make up, space and time, they have to do that. Okay, I learned that during the time when they are getting ready to shed, this is when you'll notice little spots that look like they've got chalk on them, kind of like little white cloudy areas. Those are the areas that are going to shed. They need extra protein during that time to make the new skin and scales. So Finn normally does 10 to 12 feeders. When he eats feeders, that's normal for him. It's not uncommon when he's shedding for him to double that. 18 to 20 is normal. And he'll do that for a week or two. And then when you start to see it get dried off and start actually peeling off, then he returns to a normal food pattern. But had I not been giving him both salad and his feeders, I wouldn't have known that. That would have been news. So you don't want to inadvertently not give them enough protein when they're trying to make new scales. If you notice they're shedding, bump up their meat source a little bit because they have to use it to make new scales and skin. And they don't shed like we do. We shed all the time. We're always sloughing skin cells. They only get to shed for adults once or twice a year is generally it. Juveniles about every 6 to 8 weeks because they're growing so fast. But once they're full grown, once or twice a year is all they get. So you want to make sure to maximize that. If you notice that your dragon's having trouble shedding, maybe they seem to be they're staying kind of white and cloudy, they're not really getting the new skin made, they're probably not getting enough protein. So bump that up. Give them an opportunity. If it seems like they do an incomplete shed, so some of the areas shed and some don't, they probably didn't have enough reserves. One of the reasons Chimera had a couple of years, probably 3 years, of stuck shed is because he'd start to make it, but he didn't have enough nutrition to build any new skin or scales. So even though he got ready to do it, he didn't shed because he couldn't make new. So every year when it came time to do that, it just clumped on top of itself. So we've had a time, the last, let's say the last time and maybe a little bit before that he was trying to shed. It took him a while. He now can shed and he does a complete shed, but he didn't for the longest time, and trying to get that stuck shed off was quite a thing. Took lots of extra soaks. Took lots of conditioner for his skin. Like, there was a lot. So just know that they might beef up their protein needs when they're shedding. Okay. Now, females, are they gravid? Are they due to have a clutch? Are they overdue? Are they egg bound? And there's no room to eat because they can't lay their eggs. These are medical emergencies. You need to go to the vet. It's not even a question. You have to go. Those are the things. Also, when you have to take your dragon to the vet, be sure that you know what their normal habits are when it comes to eating, drinking, pooping, shedding, anything that's different or unusual about your enclosure, what your normal temps run. Your vet should ask you all of that. If they don't, get another vet. Okay. So what do you do on all these things? Well, like I said, most of these things are going to require veterinary care. If you have an animal that has a parasite, it's going to have to be noticed. It's going to require a fecal, and it's going to require medication. If you have, a temperature issue, you're going to have to fix the temps. If it's a dehydration issue, you're going to have to bump up their water. These are the things that are going to be required, but you may not be able to tell that, and it may require the vet to do some tests to let you know that that's what's going on. And I'm just going to tell you now, I'm sorry if that's the case, because it's not cheap. These are exotic animals, and they will charge you accordingly. So just be prepared for that. Okay, the other type of food, I'm going to quickly cover this because I've had a dragon. You guys know about little Miss Ruby. If you have a dragon that's binge eating, meaning they don't know when to stop, they just gobble city, okay? Some things that you're going to have to do. Now, also because of my sick and injured dragons when I get them, that's another reason why I use paper towels for substrate, because I need to see what's coming out as well as what's going in. I need to know if they had urates, so they urinated and they didn't poop. It's unusual not to do them together. Sometimes they don't, but it's more typical that they will do them together. So what does normal poop look like? If it's not normal, I need to know that. If they snuck over behind their hide and threw up, I need to know that. Especially if I'm giving them medication, because that makes a difference, right? So, and anytime they have diarrhea or they throw up, remember, they lose water. So you're going to have to replace that. Be aware that that's coming, okay? All right. Binge eaters. This means as long as you're feeding them, they're just eating it. They have no realization that they're full, okay? Ruby has just now, and I've had her over a year. I've had her almost 2 years. She, to this day, will still continue to eat. She's just now learning, oh, I'm full, and what that means. But she would overeat. So with her, I have to, and if you have one that will binge eat, and this will happen a lot if you have a dragon that is emaciated or has been starved or has gone without food. This is not uncommon. You need to know about how many they should eat. Also, if you've gotten a dragon that's been taken out of a situation, maybe it was an abandoned house, or maybe somebody left it outside an animal shelter in a box, or somebody found one running around in a wooded area. People that do that make me crazy. Don't do that. Give it to a shelter. The shelter will find a place to put it. Don't let it go outside. You're sentencing it to death. This is not Australia. None of these states are Australia. If you let them go here, they're going to die. They're either going to starve to death or they're going to become a victim of predation. So don't do it. Period. Any shelter will take them and handle it accordingly if you can't keep them. Okay. So if you have a binging dragon, they've been starved, and now, oh my God, when I got Ruby, she was 2 years old. She had never had a live feeder. Never. Not once. They were giving her freeze-dried bug parts and pellets. And she was extremely tiny. She was 118 grams. And again, was on her way to dying. Well, as soon as she saw a live feeder and realized she was going to get them routinely, she just went crazy. So what does that mean? Well, that means that I have to keep track of the quantity I'm giving her. I had to know about what should have been the right amount for her and make sure I didn't give her over that amount of feeders. And it's hard because they look at you like, well, what are you doing? I'm still hungry. I can eat more. No. And with her, I had to go slowly and increase the number because she hadn't had any, and I didn't want her to end up throwing up or hurting herself or being impacted because she acted like she'd never eaten in her life every time she ate. She was just ravenous. Okay, so I had to know about how many was typical for her. So I would give her salad first, always. And she'd clean the plate. I mean, she literally ate everything in it, okay? Which should have been more than enough, but she ate it. Then I would give her her feeders, the right amount that she should have, and she'd still look at me hungry. Okay, for the first few times, I just gave her some supplemental plant protein. I gave her some sprouted lentils, which are a good protein source, and they're little, you can get they're half, they're little lentils, and they've got like a sprout head started out of them. She loved them, and they wouldn't hurt her, so I could give her a few of those. I could give her a little tiny piece of fruit and hand feed her because, again, she had problems with human hands. She was used to being grabbed. She belonged to a 12-year-old boy, and he just, every time he wanted to hold her, he just grabbed her like she was a garden lizard or something, and as a result, she was not happy about human hands. She still isn't. I have to really work with her. She's a lot better than she was, but I think it will always be something where you're going to have to slowly approach her and very slowly with your hands. I pet her when I feed her so that she knows, okay? All right. If you're, when they're shedding, you need to make sure you know that. If there's a weather change, which might affect their appetite, you need to be aware of that. If you're giving a low nutrition feeder, so if you're giving crickets, it probably is going to take more than if you're giving dubia roaches. They're just not as nutritionally or calorie dense, so you're going to have to adjust accordingly. When you should provide a supplemental feeding, this means you're going to get some carnivore care or omnivore care or critical care or whatever the situation is. You're going to mix it according to the package directions. You're going to put it in a syringe, and you're going to try to feed this baby. Now listen, you don't want to do that. They're getting ready to go into brumation, right? So you have to know the difference. What does your dragon look like when it's sick versus when it's getting ready to sleep for a few months? You have to know. When you could do it is if they are sick and your vet says yes, do it, because they need to get a certain level of nutrition and calories in, even though they don't feel like eating. Follow your vet's directions. If they came out of brumation and it's been 2 to 3 weeks and they're not back on their protein yet, maybe they're eating their greens fine, but they're not back on bugs. Finn is notorious for this. I almost always have to give him a week of supplemental feeds when he gets up, just as a matter of course to get his system going again. So that's what you have to do. But I give him a good 10 days on his own and trying to give it to him before I supplemental feed, because it's always better if they're on their natural diet. But in the event you have to help them, you just have to know when you have to help them. Another situation is if they've been injured, been attacked by a dog, been run over by a bike, kicked by somebody, fallen from somewhere, picked up by a bird of prey and dropped on the ground. If they've been hurt and they're under medical care and they just aren't interested in eating and they've lost their appetite, you're going to have to supplemental feed them. That's the only option. They can have a feeding tube, but it's better if they don't, in my opinion. If you can supplemental feed them, that's better than having medical intervention all the time. If they're having serious bouts of constipation or serious bouts of diarrhea and it's taking you a while to kind of figure out what's going on, instead of having them constantly losing that nutrition and water, supplemental feeds. Okay, things that you can use also, you can give them a slurry. Put it in your blender, put a bunch of greens in there. You can also put some bugs in there. I know it's gross, but put them in there, turn it on, blend it so it's nice and slushy like a wet pudding. Put it in a syringe, give it to them. They'll probably enjoy it, and that way you know the nutrition's getting in, even if they're being difficult about eating it themselves. Also, you can also get smaller feeders. Even if you have an adult dragon and you have, like most of mine will eat 7/8 inch or 1 inch dubias, that's about right for them. I order on subscription the 3/4 inch because it eliminates the problem. I know that they can take those in and it'll be completely fine. Even if it means giving them a few extra, it's easier for them to digest. So that's what I get them. That way I know it's safe no matter who comes in here sick or injured. So, and then I buy them, the larger ones, as a separate order, but my subscription is the 3/4 inch. Okay. Also, Flukers makes a powdered supplement called Reptiboost, Reptiboost. That is, it's not a supplemental food source like the carnivore care. It's an appetite stimulant that does have some nutrition in it, not as much as some of the others, but it's designed so that if you give it to them a couple times, it's supposed to stimulate their hunger. It usually works for me about 70% of the time. And you can get that in your local pet store. So Flukers, Flukers, Reptiboost. And you'll see it says appetite stimulant. I like it. It's a powder. You can mix it depending on your dragon's weight or whatever the need is that you're using. I like that better than the ones that come, like Zilla has it like, it comes out like an ointment. I don't like it. It has an expiration date. You're stuck with that texture. So I think it's better. You can adjust the texture for the powdered one. So I would suggest Flukers if you need it. You can try that for a couple of days if they're having trouble getting back on their food. And then hopefully that will stimulate them to go ahead and eat. And just draw back on the quantity you give them. So if you have to go 3 or 4 days, just give less and then less and then less and offer feeders. And hopefully that will get them back on. If not, back to the vet. Anyway, that's mostly what I wanted to let you guys know. So hopefully that will be something that works for you guys. Let me know if you have questions or comments. Please like and subscribe. I hate having to say that, but really, guys, help me out. Like and subscribe and leave a comment if you have one, if anything's coming up. If you have anything happening with your personal dragon and you need to have a question, I will do my best to answer it. If I can't, I will let you know who can. So, hope everybody is having a great day, and I hope you got something out of this video. And we will see you in the next one. Say bye, Finn. He's taking a nap. All right, guys. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.